The cocaine hidden in evidence locker 47 was worth $3 million on the street. Officer Bradley O'Connor knew this because he'd helped put it there, not as evidence, but as inventory for his real employers, the Mendoza cartel. Thunder cracked outside the 15th precinct as Bradley checked his burner phone. A single text from M. Package ready for pickup. Usual spot. Midnight. 24 hours. That's all he needed to make this final shipment disappear from police custody, and then he could retire from his double life with enough money to disappear forever. 12 years of playing the perfect corrupt cop, feeding information to the cartel while maintaining his cover as just another racist officer with a bad attitude. It had been exhausting but profitable. The precinct's front doors burst open with violent force, slamming against the walls and making every officer look up from their paperwork. A black woman in her early 40s strode through the entrance like she owned the building, her designer heels clicking against the floor with military precision. Her tailored navy blazer couldn't hide the athletic build underneath, and there was something dangerous in her dark eyes that made Bradley's instincts scream warnings. She wasn't just confident, she moved like a predator. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Officer Danny Walsh, Bradley's corrupt partner and fellow cartel informant, noticed his tension immediately. They'd worked together for 8 years, laundering drug money and eliminating witnesses, all while hiding behind their badges. Problem? Danny whispered, his hand instinctively moving closer to his service weapon. Bradley studied the woman more carefully. There was something familiar about her face, something that tugged at his memory like a half-remembered nightmare. Maybe. Keep your eyes open. The woman approached the front desk where Sergeant Martinez was stationed, but instead of waiting politely like a normal civilian, she simply stood there scanning the room with the calculated gaze of someone conducting reconnaissance. Her eyes landed on Bradley, and he felt his blood freeze. She wasn't just looking at him, she was studying him like she already knew exactly who he was. She'd been investigating him for months. Bradley's phone buzzed. Another text from M. Problem. Feds asking questions about our inside man. Handle it. Shit. If the cartel was getting nervous about federal attention, that meant someone was getting close to exposing their operation. Bradley had worked too hard building his network of corrupt cops to let it fall apart now. Hey, Danny, Bradley said, his voice carrying just loud enough to establish his racist cover story for any listening devices. $10 says Miss Uppity over there is here to file another bogus complaint about racial profiling. Danny forced a laugh, playing his part. With that attitude, she probably thinks we should roll out a red carpet. The woman's head turned sharply in their direction, and Bradley saw something flash across her face. Not hurt or anger, but cold calculation. She pulled out her phone and appeared to be recording their conversation. Good, Bradley thought. Let her think I'm just another racist asshole. It's the perfect cover. What he didn't know was that she was uploading the audio directly to a secure FBI server. She wasn't just a new boss, she was a federal agent. I swear, Bradley continued, building his racist persona while his mind raced through contingency plans. These people think they deserve special treatment just because. Officer O'Connor. The voice that cut him off was like a blade, sharp, authoritative, and coming from directly behind him. Bradley spun around to see Lieutenant Torres standing in the briefing room doorway, but her expression was different than usual. Instead of her normal disciplinary anger, there was something that looked almost like fear. Conference room A. Now. And bring your partner. Bradley's blood turned to ice. Conference room A was where they held sensitive meetings, the kind where people discussed things that couldn't be overheard. If Torres was calling both him and Danny, It meant someone suspected their partnership went deeper than just being racist cops. As he stood, Bradley caught the black woman watching him with intense focus. She'd stopped pretending to use her phone and was now openly observing his reaction to Torres' summons. She'd orchestrated this entire confrontation to gauge his response. "Danny, we need to go," Bradley muttered, his mind already shifting into survival mode. If this was about their cartel connections, they might need to fight their way out of the building. Conference Room A was on the 3rd floor, accessible by elevator or the emergency stairwell. Bradley had memorized every exit route in the building during his first year as a dirty cop, standard operational security. As they walked toward the elevator, Bradley's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't from M. It was from an unknown number. "We know who you really work for. Surrender now, and we might not kill you." Bradley showed Danny the message, and his partner's face went pale. They both understood the implications. Someone had blown their cover, and they were walking into a trap. "Stairs," Bradley whispered. They diverted toward the emergency stairwell, but as Bradley pushed open the door, he found himself face to face with 2 men in tactical gear, their automatic weapons trained on his chest. "Federal agents," the larger man announced. "Hands where we can see them." The trap was sprung, and Bradley realized the elegant woman downstairs had been running the operation all along. "Danny, run!" Bradley shouted, diving to his left as gunfire erupted in the narrow stairwell. Concrete chunks exploded from the walls as bullets ricocheted around them. Bradley rolled behind a support pillar and drew his service weapon, his training taking over even as his mind raced through the impossibility of their situation. How had federal agents gotten into the building without anyone knowing? How long had they been watching? Danny had managed to reach the landing above and was returning fire with his own weapon. "Bradley, the roof. We can make it to the roof." More tactical agents poured into the stairwell from below, their coordinated movements showing this wasn't a hastily planned operation. They'd been preparing for this moment, studying the building's layout, anticipating every move. Bradley fired 3 quick shots to cover his retreat, then sprinted up the stairs after Danny. Behind them, he could hear the agents coordinating their pursuit with military precision. "This is Agent Martinez to all units. Suspects are heading to the roof. Establish perimeter." "Agent Martinez?" Bradley's mind reeled. Sergeant Martinez, who'd been manning the front desk, was federal law enforcement? How many people in the building were plants? They burst through the roof access door into the driving rain, and Bradley immediately understood how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. The entire rooftop was surrounded by federal agents in tactical positions, their weapons trained on the doorway. And standing in the center of it all, now wearing a bulletproof vest over her navy blazer, was the black woman from the lobby. She was holding a badge in one hand and a service weapon in the other. "Officer Bradley O'Connor," she called out over the rain and wind, her voice carrying clearly across the rooftop. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, drug trafficking, money laundering, and accessory to murder." The revelation that she wasn't just his new boss, she was the federal agent who'd been hunting him for years. Bradley raised his weapon, knowing it was hopeless but unable to surrender without a fight. "Who the hell are you?" The woman smiled, and it was the coldest thing Bradley had ever seen. "Special Agent Victoria Hayes, FBI. I've been investigating your cartel connections for 18 months. What was Bradley's biggest mistake that led to this moment? Was it getting too comfortable in his double life, or was there a deeper error in judgment that sealed his fate? Drop your thoughts below. I'm curious about your take on what brings down someone living such a dangerous lie. The rain hammered down on the precinct rooftop like machine gun fire, turning the concrete slick and treacherous. Special Agent Victoria Hayes kept her weapon trained on Bradley O'Connor, while federal agents closed in from all sides, their red laser sights dancing across his chest through the downpour. "Drop your weapons. Now," Agent Hayes commanded, her voice cutting through the storm. Bradley's mind raced as he calculated odds and escape routes. Danny was pressed against the rooftop access structure beside him, his service weapon shaking in his hands. They were outnumbered 15-1, surrounded and completely exposed. But Bradley O'Connor hadn't survived 12 years as a double agent by giving up easily. "You think you're smart, Agent Hayes?" Bradley shouted back, using her name to buy precious seconds while he spotted a weakness in their formation. "You have no idea how deep this goes." He was right. What Hayes didn't know was that Bradley had spent years building a network that extended far beyond just him and Danny. Half the officers in the building were on the Mendoza cartel's payroll, including some of the federal agents currently surrounding them. Agent Martinez, leading the tactical team, was also working for the cartel. Bradley caught Martinez's eye and gave him the subtle hand signal they'd established years ago, 3 fingers twice. The emergency extraction protocol. Martinez's response was immediate. He pivoted his rifle away from Bradley and opened fire on the federal agents to his left. "Ambush! We've got shooters!" Chaos erupted across the rooftop as the dirty agents revealed themselves, turning their weapons on their own colleagues. Agent Hayes dove for cover behind a ventilation unit as bullets whined through the air around her. "Betrayal!" she screamed into her radio. "We have compromised agents. I repeat, we have compromised." Her transmission was cut short as Danny's bullet shattered her radio, sending plastic fragments flying through the rain. Bradley used the confusion to sprint toward the roof's edge, where a maintenance ladder led down to the building's fire escape. But as he reached the ladder, a hand grabbed his shoulder and spun him around. Agent Hayes had flanked him during the firefight, her weapon pressed against his throat before he could react. "Going somewhere, officer?" Bradley smiled grimly and activated the dead man's switch hidden in his jacket pocket. "You really should have done more research, Agent Hayes." The explosion that rocked the building's 3rd floor wasn't massive, but it was precisely placed. Bradley had been preparing for this contingency for months, rigging charges in the evidence room where the cartel's drug shipments were stored. As smoke and debris erupted from the windows below, Hayes realized the true scope of his preparation. "You're destroying evidence." "I'm destroying everything," Bradley snarled, twisting free from her grip as the building shook. 12 years of undercover work, and you think one federal operation is going to bring down our entire network? The building's fire alarms began screaming, adding to the chaos as officers poured out of the smoking structure below. In the confusion, Bradley spotted his real escape route, a helicopter approaching from the east, its rotors cutting through the storm. The Mendoza cartel had an extraction team standing by. "Danny, extraction now," Bradley shouted, laying down covering fire as his partner sprinted toward the helicopter's landing zone. Agent Hayes rolled behind cover and keyed her backup radio. "Air support, we need immediate." Her words were drowned out by the roar of the cartel helicopter's mounted machine gun opening fire on the federal agents. The .50 caliber rounds tore through the rooftop like paper, sending concrete chunks flying in all directions. Hayes pressed herself against the ventilation unit as rounds hammered into the metal inches from her head. Through the chaos, she could see Bradley and Danny running toward the helicopter's extraction point. But she'd been planning for this moment longer than Bradley realized. "Phoenix team, you are cleared to engage," she spoke into her throat microphone. 2 military-grade helicopters rose from behind the neighboring buildings, their weapons systems already locked onto the cartel aircraft. The lead pilot's voice crackled through Hayes' earpiece. "Target acquired." Taking the shot, the first Hellfire missile streaked through the rain and struck the cartel helicopter before it could complete its landing. The explosion lit up the storm clouds, sending burning debris cascading across the rooftop. Bradley's escape route was cut off, and he was truly trapped for the first time in 12 years. Bradley watched his extraction burn, and felt something he hadn't experienced in over a decade: genuine fear. The federal operation was more comprehensive than anything he'd imagined. They hadn't just been watching him, they'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time. "It's over, O'Connor." Agent Hayes emerged from cover, her weapon trained on him as the surviving federal agents regrouped around them. "Your helicopter's down, your network's compromised, and half your dirty cops are already in custody." That last part was true. While Bradley had been focused on the rooftop confrontation, FBI teams had been simultaneously raiding the homes and lockers of every officer on his payroll. 12 years of carefully built corruption was collapsing in a single coordinated strike. Danny raised his hands in surrender, but Bradley's finger tightened on his trigger. If he was going down, he'd take as many federal agents with him as possible. "You know what your problem is, Agent Hayes?" Bradley called out, backing toward the building's edge. "You think this is about me? You think stopping one dirty cop is going to matter?" Hayes kept her weapon steady despite the rain, making her grip slippery. "You're right. It's not about you. It's about sending a message to every corrupt officer in this city that their time is up." "Message received," Bradley said, then threw himself backward off the building. Hayes lunged forward, but she was too late. Bradley O'Connor disappeared into the storm, his body vanishing into the darkness 4 stories below. Agent Hayes leaned over the rooftop's edge, expecting to see a body on the pavement. Instead, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Bradley was hanging from a fire escape 2 floors down, very much alive and climbing toward an open window. He'd planned even this, timing his fall to catch the building's external structure. "All units, suspect is inside the building's 2nd floor east side." Hayes shouted into her radio as she sprinted toward the roof access door. The hunt was just beginning. Bradley O'Connor crashed through the 2nd floor window in a shower of glass and blood, rolling across the floor of what he immediately recognized as the department's communications center. Banks of monitors displayed security feeds from across the city, radio equipment hummed with constant chatter, and 3 night shift dispatchers stared at him in shock. "Nobody moves, nobody dies," Bradley growled, drawing his service weapon as he struggled to his feet. Blood ran down his left arm from multiple glass cuts, but the adrenaline kept the pain at bay. Dispatcher Jenny Morrison, a 20-year veteran who'd seen everything, slowly raised her hands. "Bradley, what the hell is going on?" "The feds are trying to frame me," Bradley lied smoothly, falling back on the cover story he'd prepared for exactly this scenario. "I need to clear my name, but first I need you to kill the building's security feeds." Jenny hesitated, her eyes darting toward the panic button under her desk. Bradley caught the movement and shook his head. "Don't make me hurt you, Jenny. Just shut down the cameras and give me 5 minutes to get out of here." What Bradley didn't know was that Agent Hayes had anticipated this move. The communications center was exactly where a desperate corrupt cop would go. It controlled the building's entire security infrastructure. As Jenny's fingers moved toward the security console, Hayes' voice crackled through the room's speakers. "Attention all personnel. Officer Bradley O'Connor is wanted for federal crimes including drug trafficking and conspiracy to commit murder. He is armed, dangerous, and currently in the communications center. Do not attempt to assist him." The dispatchers' faces went pale as they realized they were caught in the middle of something much bigger than a simple internal affairs investigation. Bradley's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from the Mendoza cartel. "Building surrounded. No extraction possible. Eliminate all witnesses and await instructions." The cartel was willing to sacrifice him to protect their larger operation. Bradley stared at the message, feeling the crushing weight of betrayal. After 12 years of loyal service, the cartel was treating him as expendable. They'd rather see him dead than risk him talking under federal interrogation. "Jenny, I'm sorry," Bradley said, raising his weapon. "Wait!" Jenny held up her hands desperately. "I have kids, Bradley. Please." For a moment, Bradley hesitated, Jenny Morrison had always been kind to him, never asking questions when he needed dispatch records altered or evidence logs modified. She didn't deserve to die for his crimes. But the sound of boots pounding up the stairwell reminded him that hesitation would get him killed or imprisoned for life. Bradley was about to pull the trigger when the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in immediately, bathing the communications center in an eerie red glow. Through the darkness, Bradley heard Agent Hayes' voice from the corridor outside. "O'Connor, we have the building surrounded. There's nowhere left to run." Bradley moved to the door and peered through the reinforced glass window. The hallway was empty, but he could see tactical lights moving at the far end. Hayes and her team were advancing methodically, checking every room. He had maybe 2 minutes before they reached the communications center. Bradley turned back to Jenny, who was cowering behind her desk. "Is there another way out of here?" "The maintenance tunnel," Jenny whispered. "Behind the server room. It leads to the parking garage." The maintenance tunnel was a trap. Hayes had been hurting him exactly where she wanted him. Bradley forced Jenny to lead him to the tunnel entrance, keeping his weapon pressed against her back. The server room was a maze of humming computers and tangled cables, lit only by blinking LED indicators. "Here," Jenny said, pointing to a narrow access panel in the floor. "It's tight, but you can crawl through." Bradley knelt and pulled open the panel, revealing a concrete tunnel barely wide enough for a person. The air that wafted up smelled of dampness and motor oil. "You first," Bradley ordered. Jenny shook her head. "I can't fit in there with my back problems. Please, just go. I won't tell them which way you went." Bradley studied her face in the dim light, looking for signs of deception. Jenny Morrison had never lied to him in 12 years of acquaintance, but desperate people did desperate things. "Fine. But if you're setting me up, I'll come back for you." Bradley lowered himself into the tunnel and began crawling through the narrow space. The concrete scraped against his shoulders, and every movement sent fresh waves of pain through his glass cuts. Behind him, he heard Jenny's voice. He went toward the east stairwell. "He's trying to reach the parking garage through the main entrance." Clever girl, Bradley thought, sending them the wrong way to buy me time. He crawled through the tunnel for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The space was claustrophobic and disorienting, with no way to tell direction except by the slight downward slope that suggested he was moving toward the parking garage level. Finally, Bradley reached another access panel. He pushed it open carefully and found himself looking into the building's underground parking garage. Rows of police vehicles and personal cars stretched out in the fluorescent lighting. Bradley pulled himself out of the tunnel and immediately spotted his target. His personal vehicle, a modified Chevrolet Camaro with a hidden compartment containing cash, weapons, and fake identification documents. But as he sprinted toward the car, floodlights suddenly blazed to life around the entire garage, turning night into day. "Freeze! Federal agents." Agent Hayes stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, her weapon trained on Bradley's center mass. She was flanked by 6 tactical agents, all with clear lines of fire. Bradley realized he'd been completely outmaneuvered from the beginning. "You knew," Bradley said, his voice filled with grudging admiration. "You knew I'd come here." Hayes nodded. "We've been watching you for 18 months, O'Connor. We know about your escape vehicle, your safe house in Queens, your offshore accounts, and your contact protocols with the Mendoza cartel." Bradley's mind raced through his options. The garage had multiple exits, but all were probably covered by federal agents. His car was 30 feet away, but he'd never make it through the crossfire. "We also know about the dirty cops on your payroll," Hayes continued. "Sergeant Martinez, Officer Walsh, Detective Rodriguez, Lieutenant Kane, they're all in custody." That last name hit Bradley like a physical blow. Lieutenant Kane was his highest-ranking contact, a 20-year veteran who'd been feeding the cartel information about federal investigations. "Kane gave you up," Hayes said, reading his expression. full cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. He provided us with everything: code words, meeting locations, bank account numbers, even recordings of your conversations. Bradley's service weapon suddenly felt impossibly heavy in his hand. After 12 years of believing he was smarter than law enforcement, he was discovering that they'd been building an airtight case against him for over a year. "It's over, Bradley," Hayes said, using his first name for the first time. "Drop your weapon and surrender. Maybe we can work out a deal." Bradley looked around the parking garage one last time, memorizing the faces of the federal agents who'd brought down his empire. Then he smiled, the same cold smile that had intimidated suspects and victims for over a decade. "You know what, Agent Hayes? You're right. It is over." Bradley raised his weapon, but instead of pointing it at the federal agents, he pressed it against his own temple. "Wait!" Hayes shouted, taking a step forward. "Don't do this." "Why not?" Bradley laughed bitterly. "Life in federal prison or a quick death. Easy choice." Hayes lowered her weapon slightly. "Because you still have information we need. The Mendoza cartel's operations, their leadership structure, their other police contacts. You cooperate with us, and maybe you see daylight again before you're 80. Bradley's finger tightened on the trigger, but Hayes' words gave him pause. Maybe there was still a way to survive this disaster. "Do you think Bradley should take the deal and cooperate with the FBI, or is he too far gone to ever be redeemed? What would you do in his position? Fight to the end or try to negotiate for a better outcome? Let me know your thoughts below." Bradley O'Connor kept the gun pressed against his temple, his finger trembling on the trigger as he stared into Agent Hayes' dark eyes. The parking garage's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look like ghosts. "What kind of deal?" Bradley asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Hayes holstered her weapon and took another step forward, her hands visible and empty. "Full cooperation. Names, dates, locations, bank records. Everything you know about the Mendoza cartel's operations in exchange for a plea agreement." "How long?" 15 years, minimum security. With good behavior, maybe 10. Bradley's mind calculated rapidly. 10 years was manageable. He was 42 years old. He could be out by 52, still young enough to disappear and start over with whatever money the feds hadn't found. But there was one problem Hayes didn't know about. The Mendoza cartel had a strict policy about informants, death before dishonor. If Bradley cooperated with the FBI, he'd have a target on his back for the rest of his life, however long that might be. "I need guarantees," Bradley said, slowly lowering the weapon from his temple. "Witness protection, new identity, relocation." His words were interrupted by the sharp crack of a sniper's rifle echoing through the parking garage. Agent Hayes spun around as one of her tactical agents crumpled to the ground, a spreading pool of blood beneath his head. The shot had come from somewhere high above them, probably the building's upper floors. "Sniper! Take cover!" Hayes shouted, diving behind a concrete pillar as more shots rang out. The Mendoza cartel had infiltrated the federal operation from the beginning. Bradley recognized the rifle's distinctive sound, a Remington 700 with a custom suppressor, the same weapon used by Miguel Santos, the cartel's best assassin. Miguel must have been positioned in the building for hours, waiting for exactly this moment. As federal agents scrambled for cover behind vehicles and pillars, Bradley saw his opportunity. In the chaos of the sniper attack, he could disappear into the maze of cars and escape through one of the garage's emergency exits. He started running, but Agent Hayes had anticipated this move too. "O'Connor," she called out, raising her weapon despite the ongoing sniper fire. "Stop, or I'll shoot you myself." Bradley didn't stop. He zigzagged between parked cars as bullets from both the sniper and Hayes' team whined past his head. His modified Camaro was still 20 yards away, but it might as well have been 20 miles. Another federal agent went down, clutching his shoulder as Miguel's precision shots found their targets. The cartel assassin was systematically eliminating Hayes' backup, creating maximum chaos while giving Bradley time to escape. But Hayes was relentless. She pursued Bradley through the garage, using parked cars as cover while returning fire at the sniper's position. Her tactical training was evident in every movement. She advanced with professional efficiency, never exposing herself unnecessarily, but never letting Bradley get too far ahead. "It doesn't have to end this way," Hayes shouted as she reloaded behind a police cruiser. "Help us bring down the cartel, and we can protect you." Bradley reached his Camaro and fumbled for his keys, his hands shaking from adrenaline and blood loss. "You can't protect anyone. They've been watching your operation from the beginning." The federal investigation had been compromised from day one. As if to prove his point, Agent Martinez's voice crackled through Hayes' radio. "Hayes, what's your position?" "We're moving to assist." Hayes frowned. Martinez was supposed to be in custody with the other dirty cops. How was he still on the federal communication network? "Martinez, confirm your status," Hayes responded cautiously. "In position on the third floor with a clear shot on the suspect." "Give me the word, and I'll take him out." Hayes realized with horror that Martinez wasn't in custody at all. He was the sniper who'd been picking off her agents. The entire arrest operation had been feeding information directly to the Mendoza cartel. "All units, Martinez is compromised." "Repeat, Agent Martinez is working for the cartel." But her warning came too late. Martinez's rifle cracked again, and the bullet shattered the Camaro's windshield inches from Bradley's head. Bradley threw himself to the ground and crawled under the car, his mind reeling from this new development. If Martinez was still free and working for the cartel, it meant the federal operation was even more compromised than he'd realized. His phone buzzed with a text from Miguel Santos. Change of plans. Kill the Fed, then extract to Point Charlie. Point Charlie was a cartel safe house in Queens, heavily fortified and defended by some of the most dangerous criminals in the city. If Bradley could reach it alive, he might still have a chance to disappear permanently. But first, he had to deal with Agent Hayes. Bradley rolled out from under the Camaro and came up firing, his shots forcing Hayes to dive for cover behind a concrete pillar. In the momentary respite, he managed to open the car's hidden compartment and retrieve a backup weapon, a .45 caliber pistol with armor-piercing rounds. The final confrontation between Bradley and Hayes, with both of their lives hanging in the balance. "Hayes!" Bradley called out, his voice echoing through the parking garage. "You want to know the truth? Your entire investigation was a setup. We've been feeding you information for months, leading you exactly where we wanted you." Hayes' blood ran cold as the implications hit her. Every break in the case, every piece of evidence, every witness who'd come forward, it had all been carefully orchestrated by the cartel to eliminate rivals and loose ends. "The Mendoza cartel doesn't just corrupt cops," Bradley continued, moving between parked cars to flank her position. "They corrupt federal agents, judges, prosecutors, even FBI directors. You think you're fighting crime? You're just another tool in their organization." Hayes gripped her weapon tighter, trying to process this revelation while tracking Bradley's movement through the garage. If he was telling the truth, then her entire career had been built on lies. "Prove it," she shouted back. Bradley laughed bitterly. "Check your partner's bank records. Agent Johnson, the one who brought you this case 18 months ago. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, regular deposits from shell companies owned by the cartel." The accuracy of that information, details Hayes had never shared with anyone, confirmed her worst fears. The federal investigation hadn't just been compromised, it had been designed by the cartel from the beginning. Bradley appeared from behind a van, his armor-piercing weapon trained on Hayes' position. "It's over, Agent. Your backup is dead, your investigation is fake, and your career is built on cartel money. Time to choose sides." Hayes stepped out from behind the pillar, her own weapon raised. Maybe you're right about the corruption. Maybe this whole case was a setup. But that doesn't change what you are, a dirty cop who's destroyed lives for money. And what are you? Bradley sneered. A federal agent who's been working for the cartel without even knowing it? The truth of those words hit Hayes like a physical blow, but she kept her weapon steady. The difference is, I didn't know. You chose this life. We all make choices, Bradley said, his finger tightening on the trigger. Mine just pay better. They fired simultaneously. Both shots rang out simultaneously, echoing through the concrete garage like thunder. Agent Hayes felt the searing burn of Bradley's bullet as it grazed her shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing into the side of a police cruiser. Bradley grunted as Hayes' shot caught him in the chest, but his tactical vest absorbed most of the impact. He was still standing. She was down. Bradley advanced slowly, his armor-piercing weapon trained on Hayes as she struggled to maintain consciousness. Blood seeped through her jacket, but the wound wasn't fatal yet. Nothing personal, Agent, Bradley said, standing over her fallen form. Just business. But as his finger tightened on the trigger, Miguel Santos' voice crackled through his earpiece. Bradley, abort the kill. We need her alive. Bradley paused, confused. What? Why? Change of plans. The cartel wants to use her as leverage against the FBI. Bring her to Point Charlie. Hayes, despite her injury, was listening to every word. Through her pain-fogged mind, she realized this might be her only chance to survive and salvage something from this disaster. O'Connor, she gasped, pressing her hand against the bleeding wound. You're making a mistake. Yeah. What's that? The cartel isn't planning to keep you alive either. You know too much about their police connections. Bradley's confidence wavered slightly. You're lying. Check your phone. That message about eliminating witnesses? It included you. The cartel had marked Bradley for death along with Agent Hayes. Bradley pulled out his burner phone and scrolled through the encrypted messages. His blood went cold as he read the latest communication from cartel leadership. Phase 3. Eliminate O'Connor and Santos after federal agent extraction. No loose ends. Miguel Santos, his supposed rescuer, was also marked for termination. The entire extraction operation was designed to lure both dirty cops into a kill zone. Son of a bitch, Bradley muttered, realizing he'd been played by everyone. Hayes saw his expression change and pressed her advantage. They used you for 12 years, then decided you were too dangerous to keep alive. Sound familiar? Bradley's radio crackled with Martinez's voice. Santos O'Connor, what's your status? We need to move to the extraction point. But now Bradley could hear the deception in Martinez's tone, the false urgency designed to hurry them into a trap. Hayes, Bradley said, lowering his weapon slightly. What do you know about Point Charlie? It's not a safe house, Hayes replied, struggling to sit up against the police cruiser. It's a kill house. Soundproof basement, industrial furnaces, body disposal equipment. No one who goes there comes back alive. Bradley's mind raced through 12 years of cartel operations, remembering all the times witnesses and informants had simply disappeared after being taken to safe locations. His phone buzzed again. Miguel Santos, 5 minutes to extraction. Be ready. They're coming, Bradley told Hayes. Martinez and Santos, probably with a full cleanup crew. Hayes managed to stand, leaning heavily against the police cruiser. Then we have 5 minutes to get out of here. We? Bradley stared at her in disbelief. Lady, I just shot you. And I just shot you. But right now, we're both marked for death by the same people. Hayes winced as she checked her weapon's ammunition. Enemy of my enemy, O'Connor. Bradley considered his options. He could kill Hayes and try to escape alone, but the cartel would hunt him down eventually. Or he could trust the federal agent he'd been fighting and hope they could both survive long enough to reach safety. What are you proposing? Temporary alliance. We get out of this building alive, then figure out how to bring down the cartel operation that played us both. Hayes had been planning for this possibility all along. Hayes reached into her jacket and pulled out a small recording device, wincing from the movement. I've been recording everything since we started talking. Your confession about the cartel operations, Martinez's communications, everything. Bradley stared at the device. You set this up? Not exactly. But when I realized the investigation might be compromised, I started documenting everything as insurance. Hayes pocketed the recorder carefully. Right now, this device contains enough evidence to bring down the entire network, if we can get it to clean federal agents. And if we can't, then we both die here, and the cartel wins. The sound of vehicles entering the parking garage made the decision for them. Through the concrete structure, they could hear multiple engines and the distinctive slam of van doors closing. Extraction team, Bradley identified. Martinez, Santos, and probably 6 shooters. Hayes checked her backup radio and cursed. My team is compromised and my primary communication is down. We're on our own. Bradley made his choice. He reached into his car's hidden compartment and pulled out 2 extra magazines for his pistol, tossing one to Hayes. Emergency exit on the north side leads to the subway tunnel, he said. If we can make it underground, we might lose them in the maze. Might. Better odds than standing here and dying. They moved together through the parking garage, using the rows of vehicles as cover while the extraction team spread out to search for them. Through the concrete pillars, Bradley could see Martinez coordinating the search with professional efficiency. O'Connor. Martinez's voice echoed through the garage. We know you're here. Make this easy on yourself. Hayes and Bradley reached the emergency exit, but as Bradley pushed on the door, nothing happened. It was locked from the outside. Backup plan? Hayes whispered. Bradley pointed to a ventilation grate near the ceiling. Utility shaft leads to the building's HVAC system. We can follow it to the roof and maybe reach the fire escape on the building next door. That's a 20-foot climb with a bullet wound. You have a better idea? Before Hayes could answer, gunfire erupted behind them. The cartel cleanup crew had spotted their position and was advancing with overwhelming firepower. The desperate escape attempt that would determine whether their temporary alliance could survive. Bradley boosted Hayes up toward the ventilation grate, her blood leaving smears on his jacket as she climbed. The sound of bullets hitting concrete grew closer as the cleanup crew methodically searched each row of cars. Hurry up, Bradley hissed, firing blind shots over his shoulder to slow their pursuers. Hayes managed to kick out the ventilation grate and crawl into the shaft just as Miguel Santos rounded the corner with his sniper rifle. Bradley dove upward, grabbing the shaft's edge as Santos' bullet sparked off the concrete where his head had been. They crawled through the narrow ventilation system as voices and footsteps echoed below them. The shaft was barely wide enough for their bodies, and every movement sent fresh waves of pain through their injuries. This leads to the main HVAC unit on the roof, Bradley whispered as they climbed through the darkness. And then what? We're still surrounded by federal agents and cartel shooters. Then we improvise. Behind them, they could hear Santos and Martinez coordinating the search. The cartel cleanup crew was systematic and thorough. It would only be minutes before they thought to check the ventilation system. Hayes and Bradley emerged onto the roof, just as the storm clouds opened up again, drenching them in cold rain. The building was indeed surrounded, federal vehicles on the north and south sides, cartel vans to the east and west. There, Hayes pointed to a neighboring office building with a fire escape that came within jumping distance of their position. If we can make that leap. Her words were cut off by the sound of the roof access door bursting open behind them. Miguel Santos stepped onto the roof, his sniper rifle tracking smoothly toward their position. Do you think Bradley and Hayes can overcome their mutual distrust enough to escape together, or will their past actions doom any chance of cooperation? What would it take for you to trust someone who had just shot you? Drop your thoughts below. Miguel Santos stepped onto the rain-soaked roof, his sniper rifle gleaming under the storm clouds. Water dripped from his tactical gear as he surveyed the scene. Bradley O'Connor and Agent Hayes trapped at the building's edge with nowhere left to run. "Miguel," Bradley called out, his voice carrying over the wind. "We need to talk." Santos smiled coldly, keeping his rifle trained on them. "Nothing to discuss, Hermano. Orders are orders." "Even when those orders include killing you too?" Santos' smile faltered slightly. "What are you talking about?" Bradley held up his phone, showing the encrypted message. "Phase 3, Miguel. Check your burner. We're both marked for elimination." For a moment, uncertainty flickered across Santos' face. He reached for his phone while keeping the rifle steady, but his momentary distraction was exactly what Hayes had been waiting for. She threw herself sideways, tackling Bradley and sending both of them rolling toward the fire escape ladder as Santos' shot went wide. They hit the metal grating hard, Hayes' wound tearing open again as they scrambled for cover behind the building's HVAC unit. "You missed your chance to listen," Bradley shouted as return fire sparked off the metal around them. Santos advanced across the roof, his professional training evident in every movement. 12 years, Bradley. 12 years you've been family to us. And now you want to betray that for some federal puta? Family? Bradley laughed bitterly, blood running down his face from where he'd hit the grating. "Check your damn phone, Miguel." Santos discovered the truth about his own expendability. Santos finally pulled out his encrypted phone, keeping his rifle trained on their position with one hand while scrolling through messages with the other. His expression changed as he read the latest communication from cartel leadership. "Eliminate all loose ends. Santos and O'Connor are compromised. Use permanent solution." "Son of a bitch," Santos whispered, lowering his phone. The roof access door burst open again, and Agent Martinez appeared with 3 cartel enforcers. But instead of providing backup for Santos, Martinez raised his weapon and fired, directly at Miguel Santos. Santos dove behind a ventilation unit as bullets sparked around him. "Martinez, what the hell?" "New management, Miguel," Martinez called out. "The cartel doesn't need dirty cops anymore. Too much heat, too much attention. Time to clean house." The cartel was eliminating their entire police network to avoid federal scrutiny. Hayes realized what was happening first. "They're cutting all ties," she told Bradley. "Every corrupt cop, every dirty agent, every informant, they're killing everyone who can connect them to law enforcement." Bradley's mind reeled as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. The Mendoza cartel hadn't just been planning to eliminate him and Santos. They were conducting a systematic purge of their entire police network. "How many?" he asked Hayes. "Based on your network?" "Probably 50 cops and agents across the city. They're all being hunted tonight." Santos had reached the same conclusion from behind his cover. "Bradley, Hayes, we need to work together, or we all die here." Martinez and his enforcers were advancing across the roof, using the rain and darkness to mask their approach. They moved with military precision, surrounding the HVAC unit where Bradley and Hayes were trapped. "Santos is right," Hayes whispered to Bradley. 3 against 4 isn't great odds, but it's better than 3 against 1. Bradley made the calculation quickly. Santos was a skilled sniper and knew the cartel's tactics. Hayes was federal law enforcement with tactical training. Together, they might have a chance. "Miguel," Bradley called out. "Temporary truce. We deal with Martinez first." "Agreed." Santos responded immediately. The alliance was sealed by necessity as Martinez's team reached the HVAC unit. The enforcer who rounded the corner first walked directly into Santos' crosshairs. The sniper's rifle cracked once, and the man dropped instantly. Hayes and Bradley flanked the unit from opposite sides, catching Martinez's remaining men in crossfire. Years of tactical training on both sides created a brief but vicious gunfight that left 2 more enforcers dead. Martinez himself had taken cover behind the roof access structure, but he was now outnumbered 3-1. "It's over, Martinez," Hayes shouted. "Surrender, and maybe we can make a deal." Martinez's response was to pull out a grenade and hold it up where they could see it. "Nobody's making deals tonight. The cartel wants you all dead, and I always complete my assignments." The final confrontation that would determine who survived the cartel's betrayal. "He's going to kill us all," Santos said grimly. "That grenade will bring down half the roof." Bradley studied the distances and angles, his corrupt cop instincts calculating odds and options. "Not if we take him out first." "Impossible shot in this rain," Santos replied. "Too much wind, too much movement." Hayes had been listening to the exchange while formulating her own plan. What if he didn't throw the grenade? Both men looked at her questioningly. "Martinez wants us dead, but he also wants to survive. If we can convince him that killing us will get him killed too, he might hesitate." Bradley understood immediately. The federal backup teams? If they heard gunshots and explosions, they'd storm the building. "And Martinez knows the cartel will kill him if he brings that much heat," Santos added. Hayes keyed her backup radio, hoping some clean federal agents were still monitoring the frequency. "This is Agent Victoria Hayes requesting immediate backup at the 15th Precinct. Multiple officers down, suspect with explosives on the roof." The response came immediately. "Agent Hayes, this is Strike Team Alpha. We're moving to your position. ETA 3 minutes. Martinez heard the transmission and cursed loudly. He had 3 minutes to eliminate the witnesses and escape before federal reinforcements arrived in force. "Change of plan," Martinez shouted, pulling the grenade's pin. "Everyone dies together." But as he prepared to throw the explosive, a single rifle shot cracked through the storm. Martinez jerked backward, the grenade slipping from his fingers and rolling across the wet roof toward the edge of the building. Santos had made an impossible shot through the rain and wind, hitting Martinez's center mass. All 3 survivors dove for cover as the grenade went off, but it had rolled far enough that the explosion only rattled the building instead of collapsing the roof. In the sudden silence after the blast, Bradley looked around at his unlikely allies. A federal agent he'd tried to kill, and a cartel assassin who'd been sent to eliminate him. "So what happens now?" he asked. Hayes checked her watch. "Federal backup arrives in 2 minutes. Santos disappears, you surrender to clean agents, and I try to salvage this investigation." "And the cartel?" "With the recording I made and your cooperation, we can bring down their entire operation. Every dirty cop, every corrupt agent, every cartel connection." Santos was already moving toward the fire escape. "Count me out of your justice system, Agent Hayes. But Bradley, if you testify against the cartel, you'll need protection. They have long memories." "I know," Bradley replied, looking down at Martinez's body. "But maybe it's time to stop running." The sound of helicopters filled the air as Federal Strike Team Alpha surrounded the building. Searchlights cut through the storm, illuminating the rooftop where Bradley O'Connor knelt with his hands behind his head, Agent Hayes bleeding but conscious beside Martinez's lifeless body. Miguel Santos had vanished into the night, true to his word. "This is Strike Team Alpha. All weapons down. Hands visible." The amplified voice boomed from the lead helicopter as tactical agents rappelled onto the roof. Hayes struggled to her feet, showing her federal badge. "Agent Victoria Hayes, FBI. Officer O'Connor is surrendering voluntarily as a cooperating witness." The strike team leader, Agent David Park, approached cautiously. Hayes recognized him from headquarters, one of the few agents she was certain hadn't been compromised by the cartel. "Agent Hayes, we've been trying to reach you for 6 hours, Park said, his weapon still drawn but pointed downward. Half the task force has been arrested on corruption charges. What the hell happened here? The entire investigation was compromised from the beginning, Hayes replied, wincing as the medic began treating her gunshot wound. The Mendoza cartel has been running a systematic corruption operation targeting law enforcement at every level. Bradley spoke up from his kneeling position. Agent Hayes has recordings and evidence that can bring down the whole network. But she needs protection. There are still cartel assets in federal custody who'll try to eliminate her. Park looked between them suspiciously. You're telling me a dirty cop and a federal agent worked together to expose cartel corruption? The cartel marked us both for death, Hayes explained. Enemy of my enemy, Agent Park. As the medics worked on both Bradley and Hayes, more disturbing intelligence came through Park's radio. The cartel's purge had been even more extensive than they'd imagined. Strike Team Alpha, this is command. We're receiving reports of officer-involved shootings across the city. At least 12 law enforcement personnel dead in the past 4 hours, all with suspected cartel connections. The cartel had successfully eliminated most of their police network in a single coordinated night. Bradley felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. They killed everyone. Every cop on the payroll, every informant, every connection. We're the only ones left alive who can testify about their operations. Hayes understood the implications immediately, which makes us extremely valuable witnesses and extremely high-priority targets. Agent Park was coordinating with headquarters through his secure radio when an urgent transmission interrupted. All units, be advised. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison has just signed emergency warrants for the arrest of 127 law enforcement personnel across 5 precincts. This is the largest corruption sweep in department history. 127 officers? Bradley stared at Park in shock. That's impossible. The cartel network wasn't that extensive. It was bigger than you knew, Hayes said grimly. Your operation was just one branch. The Mendoza cartel has been systematically corrupting law enforcement for over 15 years. As they were loaded into armored vehicles for transport to a secure federal facility, Bradley's burner phone, which the agents had allowed him to keep as evidence, buzzed with one final message. The text was from an unknown number. Asterisk, you survived tonight, but you cannot hide forever. The family remembers. The family forgives nothing, asterisk. The cartel had resources and connections beyond anything Bradley had imagined. They're not going to stop, Bradley told Hayes as their convoy moved through the city. The Mendoza cartel doesn't just control corrupt cops. They have judges, prosecutors, wardens, even federal marshals on their payroll. Hayes was thinking the same thing. Witness protection might not be enough. If they have people inside the federal system, then we need to finish this quickly, Agent Park interjected from the front seat. Full debriefing, complete testimony, and prosecutions before they can organize a response. But as their convoy approached the federal building, Park's radio crackled with urgent traffic. Strike Team Alpha, abort approach to Federal Plaza. We have intelligence indicating possible ambush at your destination. Park immediately redirected to an alternate safe house, but Bradley knew it was only a temporary solution. The cartel had spent years embedding assets throughout law enforcement. They would eventually locate any government safe house. There's another option, Bradley said quietly. Hayes looked at him questioningly. We go on the offensive. Instead of hiding from the cartel, we hunt down their remaining assets before they can reorganize. That's not how the federal justice system works, O'Connor. The federal justice system is what got us into this mess, Bradley replied. Half the people who are supposed to protect witnesses are working for the people we're testifying against. The decision that would determine whether they played by the rules or created their own justice. Agent Park's secure phone rang, and his expression grew increasingly grave as he listened to the caller. When he hung up, he turned to face Bradley and Hayes. That was the deputy director. 3 federal judges, 2 prosecutors, and a U.S. Marshal have been arrested in the past hour, all connected to the Mendoza cartel. The entire federal judicial system in this district is compromised. Hayes felt the walls closing in around them. What are you saying? I'm saying there might not be anyone left to prosecute this case. Everyone with the authority to bring the cartel to trial is either corrupt, dead, or under investigation. Bradley's expression hardened. Then we make our own justice. O'Connor, you can't be serious. Dead serious, Agent Hayes. The cartel eliminated their police network to avoid prosecution. Maybe it's time someone eliminated their judicial network for the same reason. Hayes stared at him in horror. You're talking about assassinating federal officials. I'm talking about survival. Yours, mine, and every clean law enforcement officer in this city. Agent Park had been listening to the exchange with growing unease. Both of you need to understand, this conversation is being recorded. Anything you say about vigilante justice will be used as evidence. Bradley looked directly at the recording device mounted in the vehicle's ceiling. Good. Let it be on record that Officer Bradley O'Connor, after 12 years of serving the Mendoza cartel, formally declares war on organized corruption in law enforcement. Hayes knew they had reached a point of no return. The federal system that should have protected them was too compromised to function. But crossing the line from law enforcement to vigilante justice would make them criminals themselves. There has to be another way, she said. Name it, Bradley challenged. Hayes was quiet for a long moment, thinking through their impossible situation. Finally she spoke. We go public. Full disclosure to the media, complete transparency about the corruption, and let public pressure force a clean prosecution. And if the media is compromised too, then we find journalists who aren't. Investigative reporters who've been trying to expose this kind of corruption for years. Bradley considered the proposal. It's risky. Going public makes us visible targets. We're already visible targets. At least this way, our deaths would serve a purpose. Do you think Hayes' plan to go public is naive idealism, or is transparency really the best weapon against systemic corruption? And what would you do if you discovered the entire system designed to protect you was working against you? Share your thoughts below. 24 hours later, investigative journalist Sarah Chun sat across from Bradley O'Connor and Agent Hayes in a secure conference room at Channel 7 News. The room was swept for bugs every hour, and armed security guards stood outside the door, precautions that had become necessary after 2 other reporters who'd tried to cover the story had been found dead in apparent accidents. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Sarah said, reviewing her notes. The Mendoza cartel has been operating a systematic corruption network for 15 years, involving over 200 law enforcement personnel, 12 federal judges, 8 prosecutors, and at least 15 high-ranking FBI officials. That's conservative, Bradley replied, his voice hoarse from hours of testimony. The real number is probably double that. Sarah's producer, Marcus Rivera, looked up from his laptop. We've confirmed 89 arrests across 6 states in the past 48 hours. The Justice Department is calling it the largest corruption investigation in American history. But Agent Hayes knew the numbers didn't tell the whole story. How many of those arrests will actually result in prosecutions? Half the prosecutors who should be handling these cases are under investigation themselves. The corruption network had grown so extensive that the justice system couldn't prosecute itself. Sarah Chun had been investigating police corruption for 8 years, but nothing had prepared her for the scope of what Bradley and Hayes were revealing. If what you're telling me is true, then the entire federal law enforcement apparatus in this region is compromised. Not the entire apparatus, Hayes corrected. There are still clean agents, honest cops, and uncorrupted judges. But they're outnumbered and outgunned by the people who are supposed to be on their side. Bradley's secure phone buzzed with a message from Agent Park. Cartel assets have located your position. You have maybe 20 minutes before they move. We need to finish this now, Bradley told the news team. Sarah, how quickly can you get this story on the air? Breaking news can be live in 15 minutes, but... Her words were interrupted by the sound of gunfire erupting in the building's lobby, 15 floors below them. The security guards burst into the conference room, weapons drawn. "We've got multiple shooters in the building," the lead guard shouted. "Elevators compromised, stairwells are covered. We're trapped." The cartel had decided to eliminate all witnesses, including the journalists. Hayes grabbed the evidence files they'd brought for the interview. "The story dies if we die. Sarah, is there any way to broadcast from here?" "Not a full news report, but we have a live streaming setup for social media. We could go live on multiple platforms simultaneously." Bradley understood immediately. Digital distribution. Even if they kill us all, the story gets out to millions of people instantly. Marcus was already setting up cameras and adjusting lighting. But it has to be fast. A live stream won't mean anything if we're all dead before anyone watches it. The gunfire was getting closer. The cartel hit team was fighting their way up through the building, floor by floor. Hayes estimated they had maybe 10 minutes before the shooters reached their level. "Sarah, you ask the questions. Bradley, you give them everything: names, dates, bank accounts, evidence, locations. Don't hold anything back." "What about you?" Sarah asked Hayes. "I'm going to try to buy us more time." Hayes grabbed one of the security guard's assault rifles and moved toward the conference room door. "There's a service elevator at the end of the hall. If I can reach it, I might be able to get behind their assault team." Bradley started to object, but Hayes cut him off. "You're the key witness, O'Connor. Your testimony is the only thing that can bring down the network. Stay alive and tell the truth." Hayes sacrificed to ensure the truth would survive even if they didn't. As Hayes left the conference room, Sarah Chun looked directly into the camera Marcus had positioned. "This is Sarah Chun, Channel 7 Investigative News, with a breaking story that will shock our viewers. We're broadcasting live from inside what appears to be an active assassination attempt by organized crime figures trying to silence police corruption witnesses." The sound of automatic weapons fire echoed through the building as Sarah continued. "With me is Officer Bradley O'Connor, who for 12 years worked as an undercover asset for the Mendoza cartel while serving as a police officer. Officer O'Connor, tell our viewers how extensive this corruption network really is." Bradley looked directly into the camera, knowing these might be his last words. The Mendoza cartel doesn't just buy individual cops or agents. They buy entire departments, entire federal task forces, entire judicial districts. They've turned law enforcement into their private army. How many people are involved? Over 300 law enforcement personnel in this region alone. But it's not just about numbers, it's about placement. They corrupt people in key positions who can influence investigations, prosecutions, and sentencing. Sarah's eyes widened as she processed the implications. "You're saying they control the entire justice system?" "I'm saying they've made the justice system irrelevant. Why worry about getting arrested when the cops work for you? Why worry about prosecution when the prosecutors are on your payroll? Why worry about conviction when the judges take your money?" The live stream counter on Marcus's laptop showed over 100,000 viewers and climbing rapidly. Comments were flooding in as people shared the broadcast across social media platforms. Suddenly, the conference room door exploded inward as cartel gunmen breached their position. But instead of the quick execution they'd planned, they found themselves facing live cameras broadcasting to hundreds of thousands of viewers. "Don't shoot," Sarah shouted, keeping the camera rolling. "We're live on the internet. The whole world is watching." The lead gunman, a scarred man in tactical gear, hesitated. Killing witnesses in private was one thing. Committing murder on live television was something else entirely. But his hesitation lasted only seconds. The cartel had invested too much in this corruption network to let it collapse because of public exposure. "Kill them all," he ordered. The cartel was willing to commit mass murder on live television rather than let the truth survive. As the gunmen raised their weapons, Agent Hayes appeared in the doorway behind them, her assault rifle chattering as she caught the hit team in crossfire. 2 cartel soldiers went down immediately, but the others spun around to return fire. Hayes dove behind an overturned table as bullets shredded the conference room. "Bradley, keep talking. Don't let them silence the story." Bradley continued his testimony even as gunfire erupted around him. "The evidence is in Safety Deposit Box 447 at First National Bank. The account numbers, the recordings, the photographs, everything you need to prosecute the entire network." Sarah kept the camera running, documenting both the confession and the assassination attempt. The viewer count had passed 500,000 and was still climbing as news outlets across the country picked up the live stream. Hayes emptied her magazine at the cartel gunman, but she was outnumbered and outgunned. A burst of automatic fire caught her in the chest, spinning her around and sending her crashing to the floor. "Victoria!" Bradley shouted, but he couldn't reach her position without exposing himself to the remaining shooters. Hayes looked up at the camera with blood running from her mouth. "My name is Special Agent Victoria Hayes, FBI. Everything we've told you tonight is true. The corruption goes all the way to the top, and they're willing to kill anyone who tries to expose it." Her final words were broadcast live to over 1 million viewers as the cartel gunman put a bullet through her head. 6 months later, Bradley O'Connor sat in the witness chair of Federal District Court, facing a packed courtroom filled with journalists, law enforcement officials, and family members of corruption victims. His testimony had already resulted in the largest mass prosecution in American legal history: 127 indictments, 89 convictions, and the complete restructuring of 3 federal law enforcement agencies. Special Prosecutor Maria Santos, no relation to the cartel assassin, approached the witness stand with a thick file of evidence. She had been brought in from the Justice Department's Public Integrity Section specifically because she had no prior connections to the corrupted regional system. "Mr. O'Connor, you've been testifying for 3 weeks about your 12 years as an undercover asset for the Mendoza cartel. Today, we're going to discuss the night Agent Victoria Hayes died to ensure this truth reached the public." Bradley had relived that night hundreds of times in his mind, but it never got easier. "Agent Hayes saved my life and the lives of the journalists. Without her sacrifice, none of us would have survived to expose the corruption." Let's be clear about the scope of what was exposed. How many law enforcement personnel were ultimately implicated? 347 across 6 states, from beat cops to federal judges. The cartel had been systematically corrupting key personnel for over 15 years, creating what amounted to a shadow justice system. Prosecutor Santos turned to face the jury. And the live broadcast that night, how many people witnessed it? Over 2 million viewers by the time it ended. The recording went viral on social media, and every major news network picked it up within hours. The public exposure had created so much pressure that even corrupted officials couldn't suppress the prosecutions. In the gallery, Bradley could see Sarah Chin, the journalist who had risked her life to broadcast the truth. She was now working on a book about the case, having won a Pulitzer Prize for her coverage of the corruption network. Judge Patricia Williams, one of the few federal judges who had been thoroughly vetted for clean hands, addressed the packed courtroom. "Before we proceed to sentencing, I want to acknowledge the unprecedented nature of this case. The corruption exposed by Mr. O'Connor's testimony has shaken the foundations of law enforcement in this region." "Your Honor," Prosecutor Santos interjected, "the state recommends a sentence of 15 years in federal prison, with eligibility for parole in 8 years, in recognition of Mr. O'Connor's cooperation and the value of his testimony." But Bradley's defense attorney, David Park, the same Agent Park who had helped coordinate his protection, stood to address the court. Your Honor, we request consideration of time served plus community service. Mr. O'Connor has spent the past 6 months in protective custody, providing testimony that has resulted in the prosecution of the largest corruption network in American history. Judge Williams consulted her notes. Mr. O'Connor, please stand. Bradley rose, knowing that this moment would determine whether he spent the next decade in prison or had a chance to rebuild his life. In 30 years on the federal bench, I have never seen a case quite like this one, Judge Williams began. You committed serious crimes over a period of 12 years. You corrupted the badge you swore to honor, betrayed the public trust, and facilitated the operations of a dangerous criminal organization. Bradley felt his hopes sinking as the judge continued. However, your decision to cooperate with federal authorities, despite knowing it would likely result in your death, has prevented immeasurable harm to our justice system. Your testimony has exposed corruption that might have continued for decades, destroying public faith in law enforcement. The final judgment that would determine Bradley's fate and the meaning of his redemption. Furthermore, the court recognizes that you were marked for death by the same criminal organization you served. Your cooperation was not just about seeking leniency, it was about survival and, ultimately, about doing what was right. Judge Williams paused, her eyes finding Bradley's in the packed courtroom. Therefore, this court sentences you to time served, plus 2,000 hours of community service to be performed in partnership with federal law enforcement agencies working to rebuild community trust in corrupted districts. The courtroom erupted in surprised murmurs. Bradley felt his knees go weak with relief. Additionally, the judge continued, you will remain under federal protection for a period of 5 years, as the court recognizes that the Mendoza cartel and its associates continue to pose a credible threat to your life. As the gavel came down, Bradley looked up at the courtroom gallery and saw something he hadn't expected. Agent Hayes' mother, an elderly black woman who had been attending every day of the trial. After the proceedings ended, she approached him in the hallway. Mrs. Hayes, Bradley said, struggling to find words. I'm sorry for your loss. Your daughter died because of choices I made years ago. The older woman studied his face for a long moment. My daughter died because she chose to do the right thing, even when it cost her everything. That's the kind of person she was. Bradley nodded, unsure how to respond. But she also died believing that you had changed, that you were finally ready to tell the truth no matter what it cost you. Mrs. Hayes placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Don't make her sacrifice meaningless. The real redemption wasn't the legal verdict. It was earning forgiveness from the family of the woman who died saving him. Asterisk. 3 months later, Bradley O'Connor stood in the community center gymnasium in East Baltimore, wearing a simple polo shirt instead of a police uniform. Around him, 30 teenagers from the neighborhood listened as he explained how corruption destroys communities from the inside out. The thing about being a dirty cop, Bradley told them, is that you tell yourself you're just bending the rules, just looking the other way, just making a little extra money to pay the bills. A teenage girl raised her hand. But you knew it was wrong, right? Bradley nodded. I knew, but I kept telling myself that everyone else was doing it, that the system was already broken, that my small part didn't matter. What changed your mind? Bradley thought about Agent Victoria Hayes, about her determination to expose the truth even when it meant facing almost certain death, about her mother's forgiveness, and about the responsibility he now carried to honor both their memories. I met someone who showed me that individual choices do matter, that one person deciding to do the right thing can change everything, even if it costs them their life. After the session, Bradley walked outside into the afternoon sunlight. His federal protection detail followed at a discreet distance, but for the first time in years, he felt genuinely free. His phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chin, New corruption story in Chicago. Interested in consulting on the investigation? Bradley looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "When do we start?" The war against corruption would continue, and Bradley O'Connor, former dirty cop, former cartel asset, and current federal witness, would spend the rest of his life fighting the system he had once served. It wasn't the redemption he would have chosen, but it was the one he had earned. And somewhere he hoped Agent Victoria Hayes would have approved.